Back when I was 17, my dad and I moved into a duplex on the edge of town. It wasn't supposed to be permanent. That was what he kept saying anyway. It's just for a while. Just until things settle. Just until we figure out what comes next. But when you're 17 and your parents split up, nothing feels temporary. Every cardboard box feels like proof that your old life is already gone. Every quiet dinner feels like someone forgot to invite the rest of your family. My mom stayed in the house with my little sister. I went with my dad because the school district made more sense, and because I think he needed somebody around, even if neither of us said that out loud. The duplex was smaller than what we were used to. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a narrow kitchen, a living room that always smelled faintly like dust and old carpet, no matter how much we cleaned. It had been built sometime in the 70s, and everything about it felt tired. The walls were thin, the hallway light flickered before it came on, the bathroom fan sounded like it was chewing gravel, and at night, when the whole place settled, you could hear soft pops inside the walls like the house was cracking its knuckles. Our side was Unit B. Unit A on the other side was empty. At least, that was what the landlord told us. The landlord's name was Mr. Dempsey, and he was one of those older guys who acted friendly until you asked him to fix something. Then suddenly he had a funeral, or a dentist appointment, or a cousin who needed help moving. He gave my dad the keys on a Friday afternoon and kept saying we were lucky to get the place. Quiet street, he said. Good neighbors. Empty unit next door, so you won't have to worry about noise. That last part sounded good at the time. I didn't realize how much worse it would be to hear noise from a place that was supposed to be empty. For the first few weeks, things were normal enough. Dad worked at a warehouse outside town, mostly early shifts. He'd leave before sunrise, come home around 4, shower, cook something basic, and fall asleep on the couch with its feet too loud. I was finishing my junior year, so most of my time was school, work, homework, and pretending the divorce wasn't bothering me. Dad tried. I'll give him that. He bought too many frozen pizzas because he knew I liked them. He started making breakfast on Sundays. He asked about school more than he ever had before, even if he didn't always know what to do with the answers. But I could tell the quiet was getting to him. Some people handle loneliness by staying busy. Dad handled it by finding reasons not to be home. He started going fishing again. Then he joined a pool league with some guys from work. Then he started coming home late on Thursday nights, smelling like cigarette smoke and cheap bar food, saying he was fine even when he clearly wasn't. That was around the time I first heard the name. Ward. Not Mr. Ward at first. Just Ward. It was a Saturday morning. I woke up late, probably around 11, and found Dad asleep in his bedroom with all his clothes still on. His work boots were on the floor, but his socks were still damp, like he had stepped in water and never changed. His door was open, and he was lying sideways across the bed, one arm hanging off the mattress. There was black dust on his fingers. Not dirt. Not grease. It looked like soot. I figured he'd had too much to drink the night before. I had never really seen him like that, but after everything with my mom, I didn't know what counted as normal anymore. I made myself cereal and left him alone. When he finally came out around 3 in the afternoon, he looked awful. His hair was flattened on one side. His eyes were bloodshot. His face had that gray, heavy look people get when they slept too long but somehow didn't rest at all. He stood in the kitchen for a few seconds like he didn't remember why he walked in. "You okay?" I asked. He rubbed his face. "Yeah, I think so. You look sick." "I'm not sick." He opened the fridge, stared into it, then closed it without taking anything out. Then he said, almost to himself, "Ward doesn't like the cold." I looked up from my bowl. "What?" He blinked like he hadn't meant to say it. "Nothing." "Who's Ward?" Dad shook his head. "No one." But he looked toward the hallway when he said it. Not at me. Not at the fridge. The hallway. That was the first thing. The second thing happened that same night. I woke up around 2 in the morning because I heard someone moving around in the kitchen. Not sneaking, not trying to be quiet, just moving slowly, opening drawers, closing cabinets, stepping from the sink to the stove and back again. At first I thought it was Dad getting water. Then I heard scraping. A long dry scrape. Like something being dragged against wood. I got out of bed and opened my door. The kitchen light was off, but the little bulb over the stove was on. It gave everything this weak yellow glow. Dad was standing in front of the back door with a black marker in his hand. He had drawn a thick line across the bottom of the door. Not a symbol. Not a word. Just a line, maybe 6 inches long, right at ankle height. "What are you doing?" I asked. He turned around slowly. His eyes looked unfocused. "I'm keeping him out," he said. "Keeping who out?" He looked down at the marker like he didn't recognize it. Then he yawned. A big, heavy yawn, like he was about to fall asleep standing up. "Ward," he said. Then he walked past me, went into his bedroom, and shut the door. In the morning, he didn't remember any of it. At least, that was what he said. I showed him the line on the back door. He stared at it for a while, then said maybe he'd been sleepwalking. I asked him again who Ward was. He said he didn't know, but he said it too fast. A few nights later, I heard him again. This time, he was in the hallway, walking from his bedroom to the bathroom, then from the bathroom to the kitchen, then back, over and over. I stayed in my room and listened. The footsteps were uneven, dragging a little on the left side. Dad didn't walk like that. At one point, I heard him stop outside my door. There was no knock, no voice, just breathing, slow and close. I sat up in bed and stared at the dark gap under the door. A shadow of 2 feet blocked the hallway light. I waited for him to say something. He didn't. After maybe 30 seconds, he moved away. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, I asked Dad if he had been walking around. He looked embarrassed. Maybe. Maybe? I've been stressed. That doesn't answer the question. He sat at the kitchen table, both hands wrapped around his coffee mug. I don't know, he said. I woke up tired, that's all. I wanted to push harder, but he looked so exhausted that I let it go. That was the pattern for a while. Every few nights, something happened. Sometimes the black line on the back door would be redrawn after I cleaned it off. Sometimes food would be missing from the fridge. Sometimes I would wake up and hear Dad walking in the hallway, stopping outside my room, then continuing to the kitchen. But the thing that bothered me most was the vent. There was a floor vent in the hallway between my room and Dad's. It was one of those old metal ones with narrow slats and screws in the corners. About a month after we moved in, I noticed the screws were scratched. Not stripped like someone had used the wrong screwdriver. Scratched around the edges, like someone had been removing the vent cover and putting it back. I asked Dad about it. He looked at the vent, then at me. I didn't touch it. Are you sure? He got irritated. I said I didn't touch it. That night, I put a small piece of clear tape over one corner of the vent. The next morning, it was broken. The vent cover was still in place, but the tape had been split cleanly down the middle. I didn't tell Dad right away. I wanted to be sure. So the next night, I did something stupid. I waited. I pretended to go to bed around 10:30, turned my lights off, and sat on the floor beside my door with my phone in my hand. For 2 hours, nothing happened. Then just after 1 in the morning, I heard a sound from the hallway. Metal shifting. Softly. I put my hand on my doorknob but didn't turn it. The metal sound came again. Then, a faint scrape. I opened my door slowly. The hallway was dark except for the kitchen light at the far end. Dad was crouched over the vent. At least I thought it was Dad. He was wearing Dad's gray hoodie, same one he always threw over his chair after work. His back was to me, and he was hunched low, one hand on the vent cover. "Dad," I whispered. He stopped moving. Not suddenly. Slowly. Like something in him froze one piece at a time. Then he turned his head. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I could see enough to know something was wrong. His hair was parted down the middle. Dad never wore his hair like that. And he looked thinner. Not dramatically, not enough that I should have noticed in the dark. But wrong. Like someone had copied the outline of my dad but missed the details. "What are you doing?" I asked. He stood up. He didn't answer. The vent cover was loose beside his foot. I took one step forward. "Dad?" He raised one finger to his mouth. "Sage." Then he whispered, "He's sleeping." I didn't move. "Who's sleeping?" The man smiled. That was when I knew. I don't know how else to explain it. Up until then, some part of my brain was still trying to make it my dad. Sleepwalking, stress, drinking, something medical. But my dad didn't smile like that. This was wide and thin and empty. The man whispered, "I'm Ward." Then he turned and walked into the kitchen. I stood frozen in the hallway. I should have run out the front door. I should have screamed. I should have done anything other than follow him. But I followed him. He opened the fridge and started pulling things out. Milk, bologna, a jar of pickles, a block of cheese. He placed everything carefully on the counter like he was setting up a display. I flipped on the kitchen light. He flinched hard. Not like a person bothered by brightness. like an animal caught where it wasn't supposed to be. For the first time, I saw his face clearly. It was not my father. He was older than Dad by maybe 10 years. Narrow face, baggy beard, sunken cheeks, dark hair with gray at the temples. He was wearing Dad's hoodie, but the sleeves were too short on him. My whole body went numb. I backed up so fast I bumped into the wall. He looked just as surprised as I felt. "I didn't know there was a boy," he said. His voice was low and rough. For a second, neither of us moved. Then he picked up a knife from the counter. Not in a dramatic way. Not like a movie. He just closed his hand around it because it was there. I raised both hands. "Okay," I said. "Okay, I'm leaving." He pointed the knife toward the hallway. "Go to bed." I shook my head. "My dad's here. He's sleeping." "How do you know?" Ward's eyes moved toward Dad's bedroom door, then back to me. I listened. I ran. I didn't run to my room. I ran to Dad's door and threw it open. He was in bed. Actually, in bed. Sound asleep. His breathing was heavy and uneven, and he didn't wake up even when I shouted his name. Behind me, I heard the kitchen drawer close. I slammed Dad's door shut, locked it, and pushed my shoulder against it. For a few seconds, I heard nothing. Then footsteps came down the hall. Slow. Dragging slightly on the left side. They stopped outside the bedroom door. Ward knocked once. A soft tap. Then he whispered through the door, "I don't want trouble." I was shaking so badly, I could barely hold my phone. I called 911. Ward must have heard the dispatcher, because the footsteps moved away. Then, I heard the vent cover scrape across the hallway floor. By the time police arrived, he was gone. The vent cover was back in place. The black line on the back door had been redrawn. The food was still on the counter. And Dad was still so deeply asleep that 2 officers had to shake him for almost a minute before he woke up. He had no idea what was happening. At first, the police thought I had mistaken someone else for my dad because I was tired. Then they saw the hoodie was missing from Dad's chair. Then they found it shoved halfway inside the hallway vent. That was when everybody got quiet. One officer removed the vent cover. There was no duct beneath it. Just a dark rectangular gap dropping into a crawl space. A crawl space we had not been told about. It ran under both units. Unit E and Unit B, the empty side and ours. The officers searched underneath with flashlights. They found a blanket, empty food wrappers, a flashlight wrapped in tape, a screwdriver, and one of Dad's work shirts folded under a pipe like someone had been using it as a pillow. They did not find Ward. The landlord acted shocked when he showed up the next day. He kept saying the crawl space was supposed to be sealed. He said nobody could live under there. He said the vent must have been loose for years and no one noticed. Dad almost punched him. I had never seen my father that angry. Not during the divorce. Not when money got tight. Not even when Mom called and they argued in low voices because they didn't want me to hear. This was different. Because this wasn't just a bad rental. Somebody had been living under us. Somebody had been coming up at night. Somebody had been wearing his clothes. And Dad had slept through it. That was the part that didn't make sense. My dad was not a heavy sleeper. He woke up if someone opened the fridge too hard. He woke up if a car passed with bass too loud. So why hadn't he woken up when a stranger was inside our house? The answer came 2 days later. Dad found a small bottle behind the refrigerator. It had no label. Just a plastic squeezed bottle with a cloudy liquid inside. We never got a clear answer about what it was. Police took it. They said they would test it. No one ever followed up with us. But after that bottle was gone, Dad stopped sleeping like the dead. He still had nightmares. But he woke up. The landlord offered to move us into another unit he owned across town. Dad said no. We stayed with my mom for 2 weeks instead. That was awkward for everyone, but nobody argued. During that time, police searched Unit A more thoroughly. The empty side. They found the back window unlocked. They found the access panel in the bedroom closet removed. And behind the wall, in a narrow dead space between the 2 units, they found where Ward had really been staying. Not just the crawl space. A little space behind the drywall. Big enough for a mattress pad, some plastic bins, and a person who didn't mind crouching. There were stolen clothes in there. Mostly men's hoodies, socks, and work shirts. There were canned goods. Old batteries. A radio. A stack of mail that wasn't his. And notebooks. That was the part that kept me awake after. The notebooks. Police wouldn't let us read all of them, but one officer told Dad enough that he sat in the car afterward with both hands on the steering wheel and didn't speak for 10 minutes. Ward had been writing about us. Not stories. Notes. When Dad left for work. When I left for school. What we ate. What time we showered. Which floorboards creaked. How often we checked the locks. How long Dad slept after drinking orange juice. Which cabinet had the snacks. Which hoodie smelled most like him. And my name. Over and over. He had written my name on 3 pages. Not in sentences. Just my name. Like he was practicing it. That was when Dad finally told me something he had been holding back. The name Ward was not random. Before we moved into the duplex, Dad had gone to a bar with some guys from work. He had been there a few times after the separation. One night, some older men started talking to him outside near the smokers. Dad said he didn't remember much about the conversation. The man told him he used to do maintenance in that neighborhood, said he knew every building on that street, said people didn't appreciate old houses because they didn't understand how many spaces old houses had. Dad thought he was just a drunk guy rambling. The man introduced himself as Ward. Dad didn't think about him again until I asked who Ward was. That meant Ward hadn't stumbled into our lives after we moved in. He had seen Dad before. He may have followed him. He may have known exactly which duplex was empty. Or worse, he may have already been there when we arrived. Dad wanted to move immediately. My mom wanted us to move immediately. I wanted to move immediately. But we didn't have money for a new place right away, and breaking the lease became a fight with Mr. Dempsey. He kept saying police never proved Ward entered through a defect he knew about. He said there was no proof the liquid in the bottle was anything dangerous. He said there was no proof Ward was still nearby. That sentence stuck with me. No proof Ward was still nearby. As if that was comforting. We went back to the duplex because we had no choice. Dad bought longer screws for every vent. He installed sliding bolts on the bedroom doors. He put a wooden dowel in every window track. He bought cheap cameras and placed one in the hallway, one in the kitchen, and one facing the back door. For about a week, nothing happened. No footsteps. No missing food. No black line on the door. No Ward. It started to feel like maybe the worst part was over. Then one night, Dad woke me up at 3 in the morning. He was standing in my doorway holding his phone. "Get dressed," he said. His voice was quiet, but something in it made me move immediately. "What happened?" He showed me the camera feed. The hallway camera had recorded motion at 2:41 a.m. The clip showed the hallway outside my room. At first, it was empty. Then the floor vent shifted. Just a little. The screws didn't come out, but the cover moved upward against them. Like someone underneath was pushing. Then a hand slid through one of the slats. Not all the way. Just 2 fingers. They felt around slowly. Then withdrew. The vent settled back down. The clip ended. I watched it twice. Then a third time. Dad was pale. "I checked the vent," he whispered. "It's still screwed down." Is he under there right now?" Dad looked toward the hallway. "I don't know." We called the police again. They searched the crawl space again. Nothing. No blanket this time. No food wrappers. No flashlight. No Ward. But one of the officers found fresh mud beneath the vent. Not old dust. Fresh mud. Someone had been there. That night, Dad and I slept in the living room with the lights on. Not really slept. We sat on the couch until the sun came up, listening to every crack in the walls. Around 6 in the morning, the kitchen camera sent an alert. We were both sitting 10 feet away from the kitchen. Nothing moved inside. Dad opened the feed anyway. At first, we didn't see anything. Then we noticed the cabinet under the sink was open. Just an inch. It had been closed when we sat down. Dad grabbed a hammer from the coffee table and moved toward it. I told him not to. He opened it anyway. There was no one inside. Just pipes. Cleaning supplies. A trash bag roll. And a folded piece of paper. Dad picked it up. I watched his face change as he read it. He handed it to me. It said, "You sleep louder when you're afraid." That was the last night we stayed there. Dad didn't care about the lease after that. He packed what we could carry, loaded the car, and drove us to my mom's house before noon. We left furniture behind. We left dishes behind. We left clothes in the dryer. Dad said none of it mattered. Mr. Dempsey threatened legal action until my mom's brother, who was a lawyer, made one phone call. After that, suddenly the lease was resolved. For a while I thought the story ended there. A man hiding in an old duplex. A landlord too cheap or too careless to check empty spaces. A father and son lucky enough to get out. That would have been bad enough. But it didn't end there. 3 months after we moved out, Dad got a call from a detective. They had found Ward. Not arrested. Found. He was dead. He had been discovered in an abandoned house 2 streets over from the duplex. The place had been boarded up for years, but someone reported a smell after a heat wave. Ward had been living inside the walls. Not in the house. Inside the walls. He had cut openings behind cabinets and closets, moving through dead spaces like tunnels. Police found bedding behind the pantry, food hidden behind a bathroom access panel, batteries, tools, a stack of clothes, and notebooks. More notebooks. The detective asked Dad to come identify some property they believed was ours. I went with him because I didn't want him to go alone. At the station, they showed us a plastic bin with things Ward had taken from the duplex. Dad's hoodie, my old school ID, a missing kitchen knife, a photo of me and Dad from a box we kept in the closet, and a small white baby monitor. We had never owned a baby monitor. Dad looked confused. The detective explained that Ward had used it to listen through walls. He would hide one end inside vents or behind outlets and keep the receiver with him. That was how he knew when people were home. That was how he knew when Dad was asleep. That was how he knew our names before we ever spoke to him. Then the detective showed us 1 page from the notebook. Just 1. Most of it was being kept as evidence, but he wanted to know if we understood 1 sentence. It was written in shaky block letters. The boy knows the floor is hollow. I remembered the hallway vent, the broken tape, the way Ward stopped outside my bedroom door, the breathing, the practicing of my name. I told the detective I didn't know what it meant. That was a lie. I knew exactly what it meant. It meant he knew I had noticed, and he was deciding what to do about it. The official story was that Ward had likely been homeless for years, moving between vacant houses, rentals, and crawl spaces. He used old maintenance access points, loose vents, and broken locks. He watched people, learned their routines, took things that made it easier to blend in. The police called it burglary, trespassing, stalking, possible poisoning. A bunch of words that sounded too clean for what it felt like. Because none of those words describe waking up and realizing someone has been under your floor. None of them describe seeing a man in your father's clothes whisper that your father is sleeping. None of them describe finding out someone has been writing your name over and over in a space behind your wall. Dad never fully recovered from it. Not in a dramatic way. He kept working. He found a better apartment. He made breakfast on Sundays again. But he changed. He slept with the bedroom door locked. He checked vents in every place he entered. If we stayed at a hotel, he looked behind the curtains, under the bed, inside the closet, behind the bathroom access panel. He stopped going to bars. He stopped talking to strangers outside places. And every now and then, I would catch him looking at me like he wanted to apologize for something that wasn't his fault. I moved out years later. I'm an adult now. I have my own place. It's newer, no crawl space, no shared walls, no strange vents in the hallway. At least, that's what I told myself when I signed the lease. But habits stay. Before I sleep, I check the locks, then the windows, then the closets, then the air return in the hallway. I know how that sounds. I know most people would say I'm paranoid. Maybe I am. But last winter, the heat went out in my apartment, and maintenance had to come check the unit in the ceiling. The guy who showed up was young, friendly, normal. He pulled down the attic ladder in the hallway, climbed halfway up, and shined his flashlight around. Then he paused. "What the hell?" he said. I was standing below him. "What?" He didn't answer right away. Then he reached into the attic and pulled something loose from a beam. A strip of black tape. Old. Dusty. Folded over on itself. Nothing dangerous. Nothing dramatic. Just a piece of tape. But on the sticky side, written in faded marker, was 1 word. Ward. The maintenance guy laughed nervously and said the previous tenant must have been weird. I laughed too. Because that's what you do when the other option is letting someone see your hands shake. He threw it in the trash. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch until morning with every light on, listening to the quiet hum of the building. And around 4, when the heater finally kicked back on, the hallway vent gave 1 soft metallic pop. Probably normal. Probably the duct expanding from the warm air. Probably nothing at all. But I still got up. I still walked over. I still stood above it for almost 10 minutes. And I still found myself whispering into the floor just once. "Who's there?" No one answered. That should have made me feel better. It didn't, because the worst thing Ward ever taught me was that silence does not mean empty. Sometimes silence just means whoever is there already knows when to stay quiet.